Kim, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Yes, I'm absolutely super. Thank you very much. Hello to our friends at home. We'll welcome Kim to the show. I've been looking at Kim's channel for a few years now. It's I suppose you'd call it a spiritual channel, and I find that everything Kim says is pretty much in line with the conclusions I've come to over the years. I won't necessarily say it's always easy to put spirituality into practice, but I guess that's why they call it the spiritual battle. I thought it would be great when you look at what's going on in the world. And, you know, I have friends, they believe now President Trump is in office, everything's going to be solved. And, you know, global poverty will disappear, and the awful trades that go on, you know, on the black market, that will all be stopped. And I always say, if he's not talking in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency, then I kind of have my doubts. But perhaps Kim is going to help me out on this one. Shall we start with that topic, Kim, and then I'll ask you a bit about yourself? Is President Trump going to save us all?
Well, people who believe that haven't read the U.S. Constitution, because it's deliberately written in the Constitution that the president's powers are limited. He's not a god.
Boom. Yes. What a synopsis. And I mean, we'll stick on that subject just for a second then. So I can understand where people are coming from, because we have the material realm and we have the divine. I'm guessing this is the as above, so below. And when they see somebody like Donald Trump, who says all the right things and makes these grand promises, and I guess people who probably, because of the nature of life, that we all have our own personal struggles and challenges, it becomes quite easy to latch on to that hope. And maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe some of these global leaders will do some things right for the greater good. But where do you think, Kim, if people are struggling in their lives or they have challenges, where do you think they should start with politics, or do you think they should be looking elsewhere?
Well, I'm a spiritual person, and I have been writing spiritual books and doing spiritual conferences for a long time. So I always look for a spiritual solution rather than a physical, especially not a political one. But if you're talking about, I understand what you're saying, that they're struggling, they want to get out of the struggle. But if you look at it from a bigger perspective, I think the problem in the world is the rising inequality, because we have a small power elite of super rich people who are becoming richer and richer. And in many nations, the average population, their standard of living is going down. So I think that's the overall problem. And I don't think that Trump has even addressed that. I mean, he's a billionaire. How is the working man going to be saved by a billionaire? It's a little difficult for me to understand. But
Yes.
I will admit also that I think he got elected because the Democrats in America haven't addressed that problem either.
Yes. Are you familiar, Kim, with, I talk, to try to quantify what spirituality is, I use the dimensions.
Okay.
And for example, I say to people, third dimension, that I call it the matrix, where it's your left brain programming, you're locked in your conditioning. You believe that the people on the TV love you and they want what's best for you, and then when we have events like these big global events that kind of wake people up because the narrative doesn't seem quite right, I call that entering fourth dimension consciousness.
Okay.
And I tried to explain to people that the leap to spirituality, fifth dimension consciousness and above. And I won't profess that I know how you're supposed to get there, except to say that you really have to want to, or you perhaps have some life-changing event that happens you there. But the main difference is fifth dimension consciousness is the lack of duality. So seeing the universe or the divine as one entity rather than sort of Chris and Kim. And then obviously when you view things like conflict from that perspective, it would be crazy because, you know, I view the people in Ukraine and Russia as just a manifestation of the divine, just like we are. So it would be like me dropping bombs on myself. Does that make sense, Kim, or do you have a definition of what spirituality is?
Well, it makes sense what you're saying. I would say differently, of course, because we're all different, and so we have different backgrounds. But I agree with you that the real problem on Earth right now is that most people are trapped in what I call the duality consciousness, which is also the illusion that we're separate beings. And to me, real spirituality is when you begin to understand that there's an alternative to this, but it really doesn't change until you experience inside yourself a connection to something outside of duality and outside of your own mind. So I usually say that we have two basic states of consciousness as human beings. We can see ourselves as separate beings, or we can see ourselves as connected beings. And the spiritual path is about gradually increasing our sense of connection so we become more aware of what we're connected to, which in essence is our higher self and also spiritual beings in a higher realm.
And so is spirituality then, Kim, is it something that everybody should aspire to, or is it just for some people and it's never going to be for others?
No, everybody has the potential to do it, but whether they're ready for it or not is another matter. I mean, the way I look at Earth, one way to illustrate it is to say that Earth is a reality simulator. And we are allowed to have any experience we want on Earth for as long as we want it until we are tired of it and we want something more. So right now you look at humanity and most people are trapped in the duality consciousness, meaning they have a certain type of experiences. For example, they can have the experience that we are right and other people are wrong. We are the good people and other people are the bad people. Therefore, it's justified that we do things to them that we don't want them to do to us. But we have a right to do this because we are working for this very important cause. That's an experience you can have on Earth, and a lot of people are having that experience. And everybody has a potential to get out of it, but not everybody has had enough of it. I mean, you look at the Middle East, where they have been fighting against each other for thousands of years. I don't think you can go in there and talk to people like that about spirituality because they just haven't had enough of the struggle. So they are not ready to get out of it. I mean, if you look at the Buddha 2,500 years ago, the main thesis there is that life is a struggle, life is suffering. That's the first noble truth. But he said there's a way out of suffering. Jesus essentially said the same thing 2,000 years ago. It's just been lost in the Christian religion, what Jesus actually said. So, but there are people who are not ready to get out of the struggle. And so this is the way I look at the US election. I mean, I was personally a little bit surprised that Trump was reelected because I thought people had had enough of him. But obviously many people don't. And so now it's just, we'll see how it plays out over the next 4 years. Is he going to be able to deliver what he promised? And if not, are people going to learn a lesson from that? And say we want a different kind of leader that doesn't give us the easy promises that can't be kept.
Yes, and going slightly off on a tangent, he can always deliver It may be that he delivers what he said he was going to do, but that doesn't mean the world's going to be in a better place.
Yeah, but the other thing is he's made so many promises. Some of those promises are contradictory. I mean, he's promised tariffs, for example. He's promised to improve the living conditions of the common people. Those two things are not really compatible. He's promised to mass deportations. Is that compatible with reducing the federal budget and improving the economy? So you can see there's a lot of things there. They can't really be delivered.
Yes.
Because one promise works against another.
So we've ascertained then, Kim, that one of the principles of living in the spiritual realm, or raising our vibration, as people refer to it, is the realization, or do we say living in non-duality, so that you don't see difference and separation in every situation. What else is a tenet of living a spiritual life? I'm thinking of things like presence is something that I really I practice it a lot, and when I do life coaching with people, they very much come to me and they're so anchored in the trauma of the past and reliving those events. They can't stop telling you about when I was this happened, and then this happened, and then they did this to me, and I'm, obviously I'm in a place where I'd say, yeah, but the past doesn't exist except, sort of accept.
Oh yeah, that's a very good observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I look at it is, you can think back to a past event that hurt you, but that physical event is gone. So what's affecting you now is not the physical event, but only what's left in here. And so to me, a very, very big part of spirituality is overcoming our past, our psychology, and how that affected our psychology. I talk about when you first become aware that there's a spiritual path, you are often focused on the outer path. You're looking for some easy way out, for example, a spiritual practice, like do meditation 20 minutes morning and evening, and after a while you'll be in a higher state of consciousness. But after having followed those kind of easy promises for a while, you become aware that there's a deeper path behind it. And that path really requires you to overcome, as you said, the traumas from the past and the scars that are left in you. And I call this, in many of my videos, I talk about we have these subconscious cells we create. Because when you are exposed to a traumatic situation, you'll notice that we always have to explain everything. And that's essentially what you've been talking about. The people who are believing in Trump's promises is because they have this need that we all have to explain the world so we can feel we're in control. We have a sense of equilibrium. And we all have this need. So we're exposed to a traumatic event. And now we have to explain it so we can live with it. And in our subconscious minds, that creates what I call a self. And it's almost like a computer program. It just has a little more awareness. It has a survival instinct. So once we have created it, it doesn't want us to get rid of it. And that's why it keeps projecting at us that, oh, we need to think about the situation. We need to go over these feelings again and again. And often such a self is based on a belief that there's some problem we have to solve. And so for many people, they think that making spiritual progress is solving some kind of problem. But what I have realized after many years on the spiritual path is that it's actually not the case. We have to come to a point where we see that this is just an illusion in our own minds. It's not real, and it's not who we are. In other words, we have created the self, but we haven't become the self. It's just like an overcoat we have put on. It's like going into a theater and playing a certain role. Put on makeup, you put on false teeth, you put on certain clothes, and then you think you are, humpback from Notre Dame or whatever. But you haven't become it. that means you can let go of it. And instead of trying to solve the problem, you just have to come to see the self, realize you are more than that, and let it go. Completely let it go. Let the self die. So to me, I mean, the essence of the spiritual path is becoming aware of these mechanisms in ourselves and just letting them go.
Absolutely. Kim, I meant to say, if you see me looking over there, it's because I'm showing people stuff about your work on the other screen. Yes, Jim Carrey said something highly prophetic. He said, yeah, Jim Carrey was a great role for me. I really like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, meaning that, you know, the Jim Carrey you see on the TV doesn't exist. It's, you know, it's sort of a to a degree a delusion to sort of buy into it.
But see, this ties in with what I said earlier about we can have any experience in a reality simulator we want. And in order to have a certain experience, we have to create a certain outer personality, persona. And once we are inside of it, we are experiencing the world through that. And that's fine. That's part of what the earth is meant to do. But when it comes to spiritual growth, it's actually coming to see that, well, I haven't become the persona, the role that I'm playing. And therefore, I can either change it or I can just let it all go.
Yes. And this could we say this is leaving the ego self behind?
Yeah, you can. But see, that when I first heard about ego, I was probably, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago. And the difficulty with the ego concept is that it seems like it's this big thing. It's difficult to pinpoint what the ego is. And it also seems like it's an all or nothing. Like there are some people that think, oh, I had an awakening experience and now I'm ego-free because I had this experience. But what I'm saying is the ego is actually made up of all these individual selves that are based on an illusion. And you can have a valid awakening experience, but it doesn't mean the ego goes away in its entirety, because you have to see the different elements of it and let them go one at a time. You can't do it all at once because you will go through an identity crisis and not know who you are.
Yes. So, okay, let's. I mean, I've got so much I'd love to ask you, and I'd like to hear a bit about your journey, Kim. But before I do that, let me just say, so why is this not taught in schools? For example, I mean, I had a regular schooling. Well, I didn't have a regular. I went to 6 schools before I was 10 years old. You can tell about my family background.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were crazy kids. And, never once in the whole time I was at school did anyone explain the concept of love or respect for fellow human beings, or listening,
Mm-hmm.
Exercising empathy, or that it doesn't matter if you fail all your exams and you're not the most academically gifted person. The divine has a place for you, and it's where you should be, and it's potentially where you're going to shine. So, yeah, why don't they teach this in school, Kim?
Well, I think it will be in a not too distant future. Not that like we're talking about it in a spiritual context, but in a psychological context. Because obviously you can say, what's the most important aspect of people's lives? What is it that determines whether they're happy or not? It's their psychology. And obviously children should learn about this from the kindergarten level, how to deal with their emotions, how to get along with other people. So I think it will be at some point. But the reason why it hasn't been is because, well, at an immediate level is because we have a war between different belief systems. So in our part of the world, Christianity and scientific materialism. And they will both say that this is New Age mumbo jumbo, what we're talking about. And it can't be taught in Christian schools for a variety of reasons. But if you step back from all of this, the reason why it isn't being taught is that people in general are trapped in this, what I call the dualistic mindset. And this means, as I said, we have a need to explain the world. And this is what you see in religions, ideologies, political philosophies, philosophers. And when you are in this dualistic state of consciousness, you have lost connection with the real world. So you think your mind is a complete system. And you think, or at least some people think, they can explain how the universe should work based on their level of consciousness, which is in separation and duality. So they can't see the underlying reality that everything is one and everything came from the same source. So, but you see, in the duality consciousness, and this is what I see people who talk about non-duality and they haven't gotten this very simple thing. In duality consciousness, there are always two opposites. So, capitalism and communism. Christianity is the only true religion. All others are false. Scientific materialism is the only way to look at life. All religions are false. Always two opposites. And that means that people always feel threatened, and therefore they are trying to force other people into their worldview. And this is what you see outplayed in history. There's this war between ideologies based on this. The ideological mindset is that we can define how the universe works. Whereas when you start the spiritual path and you start having a genuine connection to something outside your own mind, you realize instead of trying to define it, I want to find out how it actually works. And if you go back to Trump, he is in the ideological mindset. He thinks that he can define how the world works. For example, when he stands up and says, I'm going to impose tariffs and China is going to pay the tariffs. That's just not how it works. You ask any economist. So that's what I mean. It's an example of this ideological mindset. And because so many people are in this and we had this war between these ideologies, that's why you can't teach something like this in school. Because they are determining, people in that mindset are determining what's taught in school and what's in the news and so forth.
Kim, you're in Denmark now.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you been in Christiania?
No, actually, I haven't.
It's
I know what it is, of course.
Yeah, I think it's I think they've kind of closed it down now, but it was Friends at Home. Christiania was this almost mythical place in Copenhagen that I think back in the 70s or something. I'm going to use the word hippies. I don't mean it disrespectfully, but they kind of went to this part of town and they barricaded themselves in and kept the police out, and it became one of those places in the world that if you've been out and about that you had to visit was Christiania. Very famous for getting the best hashish in Europe, from what I remember. Have you heard of Twinned, Kim?
Yes, I know what it is. Yeah.
Yes. What's the feeling of Danes now towards Twinned?
Oh, hardly anybody even talks about it. It's not really active anymore.
Yeah.
What happened with Christiania was I think it was a genuine attempt to create an alternative to regular society, and it's a credit to Danish society that they allowed it. Unfortunately, within the last 10 years, it's been taken over by drug gangs, and there's so much crime there. And they haven't actually shut down Christiania. They shut down the trade, the drug trade, or attempted to at least. Yes,
with the way things are changing and with some of these Eastern European crime gangs, it was just always going to go wrong in the end, I think. Friends at Home. So Twinned is an organisation in Denmark, a highly controversial one, and it's the organisation that I joined. A part of it, you could say, and went to work in Africa. I worked in Mozambique with street children, and it's controversial in not just Denmark but Scandinavia, because it's there's an inner core of this benevolent, let's call it an NGO, that's global. They've got volunteer schools all kind of around the world, especially in Africa and India and this sort of thing. And it has an inner core of teachers. They call it the Teachers Group, which is renowned for being a cult, basically, and very wonderful individuals. I met probably about 100 of them, but very kind of innocent and believing. And at the end of every month, they give all their money into the Teachers Group, and they just take some in to maybe buy a toothbrush. And yet at the same time, the higher echelons of this organization are buying up all this property through this school from money that people like myself fundraised, and they're investing in, a big piece of land in Zimbabwe and an island in the Caribbean and all this kind of stuff. And Kim, it was very clever. Once you worked out what they were doing nothing illegal. They were just, you could argue it was immoral. They were getting guys like me to go fundraising on the streets of Scandinavia and sell these postcards for, $5 a time or 50 crowns. And then they were taking all that money and sort of holding it. So getting all the interest on this huge amount of money that all these students across Norway, Sweden and Denmark were raising. And then they were buying this land, investing it into land, getting teachers to work for a minimal sort of salary on there. And then the teachers had to pay back for kind of the privilege of being teachers. It was very clever. The way they
wasn't there something about some in the top using the money for an elaborate lifestyle or something?
Yes, it started off originally with, I'm going to use the word hippies again. I don't mean it offensively, guys, but it was like a bunch of hippies in the 70s. They hitchhiked down to Africa and they built a school. And then the school got destroyed and robbed, and everyone stole the medication as soon as they went back to Europe or Scandinavia. And so they started to go down on buses and regularly travel this route down to, I think it was originally Zimbabwe, when Zimbabwe wasn't even Zimbabwe yet. And then what happened is that those people become the core, the teachers group, and they started to draw in volunteers from all around the world, and it was all wonderful. It was all very ethical. They all chucked their money in a bucket every month. And then the way of the world, for people who haven't made the spiritual connection, will go to the dark side when temptation is, not always, obviously, but when temptation is there. And when the forerunners of this organization realize that, there's thousands of dollars, crowns, pounds at stake here, we can actually keep a lot of this for ourselves. And that's why you hear they've got, some island in, is it the Virgin Islands or somewhere, and all this kind of stuff. Yes, I just wanted to ask you that, Kim, because it's not often I meet someone from Denmark.
I don't know much about it. You know a lot more about it, obviously.
Yeah. When we were fundraising, I fundraised in Finland, Copenhagen, lots of places, Oslo, all around Sweden. And for the most part, people were extremely generous, but occasionally you just get someone, they tell you to get lost. I've heard about this organization. So it was interesting.
Originally they were kind of Marxist also, weren't they?
Yes, they had these, Marxist philosophies, not really born out of sort of control like it's all turned to now, but I think out of genuine philanthropy and egalitarianism. It was the same. They kind of got involved in some of the revolutions down there in Africa, and occasionally.
Oh, okay. I just know that we have a system of education, adult education in Denmark, where you can take these classes that are not aimed at getting a job, and the government pays for it. And I once read an interview with a German man who had taken some courses at Twin, and he said, well, Denmark is the only country where the government pays you to learn how to overthrow the government.
Yes. They call it folk high schools, do they not?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Yes, that's what I attended in Norway, just somewhere near Lillehammer. I lived on top of a mountain for 6 months. It was utterly wonderful, Kim. I met such wonderful people. But once you start to see the darkness in there, and then you work out how they're doing it, that they're playing they're playing people. So I got to Africa. I got to my project in Mozambique, and I kind of, we call it, I sacked it off on the first day, and I just went and played with the kids and took them fishing and went up to the villages in the nighttime and danced around the fire and go out on hitchhiking trips with the kids and stuff. And I couldn't be linked to this organization because it was, and the staff, they didn't get it. It's a bit like understanding the spiritual thing. You either get it or like you're not there yet. You don't kind of see it. So, yes.
And that's actually the sad part of this, because I have met over the years in spiritual movements many wonderful people who are very enthusiastic about changing things on Earth. But many times we are not balanced as spiritual people. So that's why we get pulled into these. That sounds good, but there's some hidden agenda behind it. And that unfortunately discourages a lot of people. And in my view, the only way to get beyond that is that you work on this connecting to your higher self and increasing, I've heard you use that word too, discernment. You discern what is coming from the dualistic mind and what's coming from the one mind.
Yes, very, very, very much so. And you can apply that to, your whole outlook on life, really. After a while, you just get to sense, the black and the white, what's right and wrong. When someone's trying to control you, basically.
Well, I have some videos on my YouTube channel where I talk about ego illusions. And I talk about how the ego, when you go into duality, there's two kinds of thinking that are very prominent there. One is what I call black and white thinking. And that is that, oh, this is absolutely right. The opposite is absolutely wrong. And if we just elect this person as president, all our problems will be solved. And this president is always right but it's very simplistic. It's like you take the complexity of life and you reduce it down to two options. And this option is absolutely right and it's going to solve all our problems. This option is absolutely wrong, it's going to make the world go to hell. So that's black and white thinking. The other option is what I call gray thinking, where you say, oh, there's no truth. There's no way we can know what's right and wrong. Like, for example, agnosticism. You can't know whether there's a spiritual side to life or not. And we as spiritual people, I actually think that from a bigger perspective, what are we meant to do here on Earth as spiritual people? We're actually meant to demonstrate as an alternative to this kind of thinking.
Yes, and I often think of it that, occasionally on this channel, you get someone that I suppose you'd call them a hardline Christian. And they say, oh, this is all nonsense. They call it new age or something like this.
Yeah, new age philosophy, or theosophy.
And I say, listen, I got a choice. I can get up in the morning, live in the past, feel sorry for myself, think the whole world's against me, think I'm never, I need to achieve this, I need money, I need a fast car, which I haven't got. So my energy is spiraling down. Because my energy is spiraling down, the universe meets me at a lower vibration and I get more unhappier. I go out the front door. I don't say hello to the person walking past me in the street because I'm just too much in my own headspace. That person then may have been going home to commit suicide and they go and do it. had I got up in the morning, smiled, realized the past doesn't exist and we just take the good lessons from it, realize that everything is perfect right now, this is how it's meant to be, and that I'm so grateful and lucky for this experience, and that if I go out with this energy, life is going to meet me at this energy and lift me up. Then I go out that front door, I smile and say good morning to that person. They go home feeling acknowledged, which so many people are missing in life. They don't commit suicide. They get on the phone and call one of their friends they haven't spoke to. They lift them up, and the universe goes up. This, I don't understand why that needs to be called New Age. To me, it's probably more like physics, or chemistry. It's energy, vibration, and frequency.
Yeah, and it's knowledge of psychology and how the psychology works.
Yes.
And it's like I said, I talk about a reality simulator. You can also say the universe is a mirror. What you are projecting out is what is reflected back by the mirror. I mean, let's say you're walking at a park in London, and here's a guy, he's sitting there looking at a mirror. He's looking like this, and you ask, what are you doing? And he says, I want the mirror image to smile at me, but it won't do it. What are you going to think? I mean, the guy's nuts. He doesn't even understand how a mirror works. If you want your mirror image to smile, what are you going to do? You got to smile at the mirror.
Yes.
And that's how it is with life. But most people don't realize this is the problem, because you see a lot of people. That's what I'm saying. When you go into this dualistic mindset, you think you're separated from others, and you think if you don't have what you want, it's other people's fault. So the simple solution is deport all the immigrants, put all the Jews in concentration camps, get rid of all the Palestinians, whatever simple solution people come up with. And people think that if just this outer thing happened, my life would be better. I wouldn't be suffering. But as we started talking about, you're suffering because of something in here. And you're actually projecting subconsciously with your subconscious mind that you want to continue to suffer. I mean, if you look at Israelis and Jews and Arabs for thousands of years, or even Arabs amongst themselves, they are subconsciously projecting, I want someone to fight. I want someone to oppose me. And, the people on the other side, they are projecting the same. So you're just fulfilling each other's subconscious projection that you want to fight with somebody. And until we see this and stop it, and Jesus incidentally gave us the key 2,000 years ago, turn the other cheek, forgive, let go of the past.
Yes, absolutely. So when people say this is New Age, I'm like, no, this is like old. This is really old information. This is.
But think back 2,000 years ago. What would the Jewish authorities, the scribes and Pharisees, what would they have said about Jesus? If they had had the terminology back then, they would have said, oh, he's a New Age preacher.
Mm. Yes, exactly.
So it's an irony, that Christianity is now, and you see, this is actually the problem. Most Christians today would reject Jesus if they met him in the flesh, because they think that Jesus would validate the interpretation that Christianity has imposed upon his teachings for 1,700 years. But he wouldn't. He would say what he said back then. And that's not what official Christianity is saying today.
Do you have any views on something I talk about a lot is the land of milk and honey, which my understanding is that scripture is allegory. It's the code of the ages, and that milk and honey is serotonin and DMT, and it's referring to when you get your body's electromagnetism right through your lifestyle and through your thinking, your endocrine glands start working like to the best of their ability, and your body starts to resonate higher, in tune with universe, aka the promised land. So I just wondered if that's something you talk about, Kim, or have any views upon?
No, I mean, obviously the body is an important part of spiritual growth, but my focus has always been more on the mind. Because to me, the land of milk and honey is what Jesus called the kingdom of God. And he said the kingdom of God is within you. And I take that to mean the resolution of psychology that takes us into, I mean, when you're outside the kingdom of God, you're in the duality consciousness. When you're in the kingdom of God, you're connected. And then you just increase that connection. But I also think the kingdom of God has an outer thing, because my whole view of life is based on the fact we have spiritual teachers. I call them ascended masters, and they are seeking to inspire us and help us by releasing new ideas all the time. And there is a spiritual teacher called Saint Germain, who's going to be the main overseer of the next 2,000-year period, which most people call Aquarius. And he has plans to manifest a golden age on Earth. But the ascended masters work within free will. You have a lot of forces on Earth that don't respect free will, but the spiritual teachers, they respect it. So we, who are the spiritual people, we have to be willing to receive those ideas so we can implement it. It's not just going to fall from the sky like some people believe. It's not like Jesus is going to come back and all our problems are going to be solved.
Yes, because I guess we're controlling the flow of energy. If energy is locked within a system, then if you want to change that system, in this case for the better, you've got to address it in terms of energy, which is in our actions and our thoughts, isn't it? Well, it starts with our thoughts, which relate to our actions, which then affect others.
Yeah, everything is driven by energy. So one way to explain what's actually happening on Earth right now is that we are making the transition from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And as a result of that, there's more spiritual energy being released. But it can only enter through people who are opening their minds to it. But there are many, many spiritual people who are open to receiving more energy. And when more energy comes into the energy system of Earth, it's like you have a dark room. You're gradually increasing the light. So we have kind of like a twilight zone. You can see there's something, you can't really clearly see what it is. But then when the light becomes increased even more, there comes a point where the sun starts shining in through the window. So now you have some areas that are very brightly lit. You have some areas that are still in the deep shadows. And that's where we're at right now in terms of humanity as such. And that's why you see people that are acting out in more and more extreme ways in order to defend their illusion, because their illusions are being threatened by the increase of the light. And what it will eventually happen is that when the sun comes fully up, the shadows disappear. But that's again where we as spiritual people, we need to open our minds not only to the increase of the energy itself, but also to what I call the one mind, or the Christ mind, or the Buddha mind, that unites everything, ties everything together. And it doesn't mean things become the same or that we become the same. That's what I sometimes hear people saying, that any differentiation is a duality, but that's not the case. We are all individual beings. And it's not like we are going to disappear as individuals, but we are going to realize that we all came from the same source, instead of thinking that we are all separate beings who are not connected in any way. You can't kill somebody if you see them as part of yourself. Only if you see them as completely unconnected to yourself. If you knew that if you kill somebody else, it's going to have a negative effect on you, you wouldn't do it. But the illusion that comes from this duality consciousness is, oh, I can harm you and it doesn't affect me because you're a separate person.
Yes, and there's some sort of karmic effect there, isn't there? Because, I mean, I was in the military, and it's utterly crazy that when I was a youngster, I thought I could kill other teenagers and there'd be no payback from, I just go on whistling and enjoy my life. And now I'm just like, bloody hell. We're so lied to, we're so deluded as youngsters. You got to work this stuff out for yourself, folks. You know, if you want to, if you want to get close to spirit, I suppose. But yeah, kind of crazy. Kim, you touched on something there that if we could close on, that would be awesome. And I think it's probably something that most people don't really know much about. And I won't pretend that I know a lot about it, but what I do know absolutely fascinates me. And that is Buddhism. And my kind of understanding is a bit limited. I'm not really like a well-read person, Kim, when it comes to spirituality. It's more, I had to work it out because, I had huge addiction problems and I, still battle a lot of issues. And so I kind of, it was like needs must for me. I learned a bit here. I worked out a bit there. I read a little bit here. And the little bit of Buddhism that I understood was that there was a prince in somewhere like India, and he lived a very privileged lifestyle, and the palace had always hid suffering from him. So he only knew this absolutely regal lifestyle. And then one day he had a glimpse outside the palace, and he saw people dying, people in poverty, people suffering with illness, people struggling to make money to live. And it sent him into such a nosedive that he left the palace to find out the answers. Why? And then he put himself through all these tough tests, being quite silent and fasting and and then it kind of like comes full circle that he realizes what we've had to realize is that the answers they're already in you. And there's a lot of other fascinating stuff, like the symbology in Buddhism, like you can explain some of these things to us, like the lotus and the what is it? The fig tree is used. The fig, because the fig blossoms on the inside. How did you get into learning about this, Kim?
Well, I learned about it through the Ascended Masters and their teachings. So the perspective I have on Buddhism is that if you look at the time of the Buddha, the dominant religion at the time was Hinduism. And Hinduism was divided. They had all these Brahmins, and they were always discussing all of these high-flung theological issues. And so the Buddha, after his awakening, he said, I'm not going to go into discussing how many angels can fit on the tip of a pin or any, discussions like that. I'm going to give people a practical path for raising their consciousness. And what he really meant was raising their consciousness from duality to an awareness of oneness, where it's not a theory, because the Brahmins had all these theories. Like I said, they're in the ideological mindset. They are debating how they think God works. But the Buddha said, let's forget all that, put that aside. Let's help people raise their consciousness so they have that experience of the oneness behind everything. And then they can walk the path of becoming more and more centered in that, because that's what he had done. He had actually gone from the one extreme of being totally focused on worldly things to the other extreme of being an ascetic who was, starving his body to death. And he realized none of the extremes were doing it for him. That's why he came up with his concept of the middle way. And the middle way is actually this oneness, where you're seeking oneness instead of going to the extremes that I talk about, the black and white thinking and this kind of thing. So Buddhism, originally, it was actually a very down-to-earth practical path for changing your psychology, as we would say today. He couldn't say it back then because I don't think they had a concept of the psyche that we have today.
Yes, that middle path. I think it's probably the same with Kabbalah, isn't it? With the three, I can't remember. Can't remember the right.
It's always seeking that balance between. And it's important to understand the middle way. It's kind of an unfortunate translation, because it's not a compromise between two extremes. It's transcending the scale. So in other words, you have the two dualistic extremes, that black and white, And then you have gradations in between. That's gray thinking in the middle. But the middle way of the Buddha transcends the whole scale of duality. He talked about the pairs. He didn't say duality. He talked about the pairs that are the opposites. And so that's the whole idea. It's actually the same path that Jesus taught. It's the same path that mystics have taught throughout the ages. Sufism, many others like this. And it's just being expressed it can be expressed in a better way today because we have more knowledge of psychology and we have more knowledge of the world. I mean, you say what we talked about energy. They couldn't have talked about that 2,500 years ago. People didn't have any understanding of it.
They haven't got that much understanding now.
No, but at least we have the concepts of energy. And I know a lot of spiritual people who are really helped by understanding this, that the world of matter is actually made out of energy. And that's why we have the potential to change things, because our minds can deal with energy. I mean, may not be able to change something physical, but you can certainly change energy. Like you said yourself, you get up in the morning and you can put yourself in a positive state of mind.
Yes, absolutely. Kim, well, it says on your Amazon page, I've just been showing it over here, you're quite a prolific writer.
Yeah.
Just asking from a personal perspective, how have you sculpted that discipline?
Well, it's taken me over 22 years to write the books I have written, but I have been fortunate because since 2002, I've been able to make enough money that I can sustain myself physically from doing the work. So I can focus all of my time on it. And that's been a real boon for my productivity, so to speak. But it's also a matter of you really love what you're doing and it's fulfilling in itself. I'm not doing it to make money. I'm not doing it to be famous. I'm just doing it because I love doing it. So,
yes, you
now,
do.
if incidentally, if you want to talk about books, I have over 80 books, so it's a little overwhelming for people. But if I was to recommend one book, is that okay that I do that?
I was just about to ask you if you could do that. Yes.
Okay. So it would be this one. My Lives with Lucifer, Satan, Hitler, and Jesus. It's a novel. And it has a storyline, so it's easy to read. But it talks about a lot of the ideas we've talked about here. So it's a good place to start for people. You can look it up on Amazon, see the reviews. For many people, it's been a life-changing book. It was life-changing for me to write it. So
it's got incredible reviews, folks. I can tell you as an author that to have all those stars filled in on Amazon, that means you've been doing all the right things. Brilliant, Kim. I will put a link for that book and for your YouTube channel and website below this video so everyone can find you. I strongly suggest you do, folks. It's life's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? And the more you listen, and you don't always have to listen to people you agree with, folks. You don't always have to listen to people that are right. But you have to you have to have an eclectic approach, I would say, and listen to everything, and then you start to see the patterns. You start to see the patterns emerge. Kim, massive thank you. Please stay on the line just so I can thank you after I stop recording. But sure. Yes, fascinating chat, and I hope this will be the first of many, because you're always welcome to come back on the podcast
anytime you want.
Thank you. And friends at home, if you can like and subscribe, the usual thing that we've all got to say. And can I give a very special thank you to everyone that supports me on Locals or Patreon or has become a YouTube member. It's because of your kindness that's allowed me to row the Atlantic starting next week. So that's me. If you're not aware, I'm going to row the Atlantic Ocean with my buddy, 3,000 miles, and we want to be shining a light for anyone who's struggling with their mental health, just like we all have, folks. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and everything is exactly the way it's meant to be. It's all a lesson, and it's a lesson for you to get happier, basically, and more balance in your life. So if you can spare a £5 for this, folks, you can see we've had some very generous people. If you can bung us a £5, folks, to help us get this message out there, to get some homeless veterans off the streets and to support bereaved service children. It relates to what Kim and I was talking about. 40% of bereaved service children these days, it's suicide, folks. And this is something that I think we all need to be talking about, because I think if you leave it up to the government, they're going to kick this one under the rug. So there we go. That just leaves me to say massive thank you to Kim again, and much love to all of you. Thank you.